You feel everyone in a room and no longer feel yourself. Carl Jung refuses to call this a breakdown. He calls it an old identity dying, the empath you buried alive years ago, and the people who need you asleep will feel it first. The conversations that used to come easily now empty you out. You go under in rooms you once moved through without thinking. By the end, you will know what is dying and what is waking. You will see why the agreeable self you built was never you, only the lid you kept the real one under. You will learn why this dying feels like grief instead of freedom, and why the people closest to you will fight it first and hardest. You will see what your shadow has been holding for you in the dark, the anger and the one word you were never allowed to say. You will understand why your very first attempt to say it will feel like cruelty, even when it is only honesty, and you will meet the self surfacing now, the child who felt everything, coming back with the single thing they never had the first time. The identity dying was only the structure you built to survive being this sensitive. The empath you buried is waking up, and they are not coming back the way they left. We will move through this in order. First, why the self you are losing was never the whole of you. Then why its dying feels like a death you have to mourn, and who in your life will resist it most. After that, what your shadow has been keeping, and why reclaiming it will feel violent before it feels like yours. And finally, what is waking underneath, and the one thing it surfaces holding that changes how you stand in every room for the rest of your life. Carl Jung gives the constructed self a name, the persona, the mask we assemble to meet the world, built out of whatever our parents and teachers and friends will reward. Everyone wears one, and a persona is no crime. It is a necessary treaty between who you are and what the world will accept. The danger begins in one place only. It begins when the mask fuses to the face, when you have worn it so long and worn it so well that you forget there is anyone breathing underneath it. Jung knew this split from the inside long before he had a theory for it. As a boy, he experienced himself as two people at once. There was the schoolboy who sat in the classroom and answered to his name, the one who fit, the one the world could see. And there was an older, quieter self beneath that one, who watched everything, who seemed to know things the schoolboy could not, who felt ancient and entirely real. He moved between the two his whole early life, and he was certain that the self the world saw was only the smaller of the two. That is the architecture you are living inside. For you, though, the mask had a particular job. Other children built a persona to win approval or to get ahead. You built yours to survive an openness that arrived with no protection. You came into the world porous. You felt the mood of a room before anyone spoke, took on grief that was not yours, registered the smallest shift in a parent's face and adjusted yourself before you knew you were doing it. A nervous system that raw needs a lid, so you built one. The agreeable self was the lid you learned to keep on the well, and it worked. It kept the water still. It kept you safe. It kept you loved. And it cost you the water. For years the arrangement held because the mask was doing useful work and you were good at wearing it. You became the steady one, the reliable one, the person who could be counted on to stay calm while everyone else came apart. People praised it. They called you wise, called you easy to be around, called you the strong one, and every piece of praise tightened the mask another notch. You did not notice the tightening. You only noticed much later that you could no longer find the face underneath. Living as the lid is a particular kind of tired, and it is not the tiredness anyone warns you about. It is the fatigue of running a translation in the background of every interaction all day for years. You feel the raw thing, and then in the same instant, you convert it into the acceptable version, the softened version, the version that will not cost you anything, and you hand that one over instead. Nobody sees the labor. They only see how easy you are to be around. They have no idea that being easy to be around is the hardest work you do. that you have been holding the surface of the well flat with both hands since before you could name what you were holding back. And the cruelest part of the arrangement is that it works. The flatter you hold it, the more you are loved for your calm. And the more you are loved for your calm, the more impossible it becomes to ever let the water move. Picture a man we will follow through this. He is in his early 50s. For 30 years, he has been the one everyone leans on. The brother who handles the parents, the colleague who absorbs the tension in every meeting, the friend who answers the phone at midnight and never once asks for the same in return. If you described him to anyone who knows him, they would use the same word: dependable. He has built an entire life on being the person who does not need anything, and it has earned him a kind of love, the love people feel for a thing that holds them up. And lately, something in him has gone quiet. Not dramatically. There is no crisis you could point to. He simply notices that conversations he used to find easy now drain him to the floor. He sits in rooms he has sat in for decades and feels himself going under, slipping beneath the surface of his own life while his face stays calm and his voice says the right things. He has started drying clean glasses just to have a reason not to go back into the room. Here is what no account of this prepares you for. When the mask begins to die, it does not feel like liberation. It feels like grief. You mourn the very self you are in the middle of leaving. The competent, agreeable person you spent decades perfecting was real to you. They earned your relationships, they carried your life, they kept you safe. Watching them fail to hold is a bereavement. And the strange part is that you are the one quietly letting them go. You are attending a funeral for someone who is not dead, someone who is you, and there is no one you can tell, because the whole world only ever met the mask, and the mask is the thing in the coffin. And the grief comes in a strange order, because you do not only mourn the self, you mourn the life the self made possible, the friendships that ran on your endless availability, the role in the family that gave you a place, even if the place was a load-bearing wall, the certainty of always knowing what was required of you, which is its own bitter comfort. When the mask goes, all of it wobbles at once, and a part of you will plead to put it back on, not because you believe in it anymore, but because at least the old arrangement was familiar, and at least you knew who you were supposed to be inside it. That pull backward is not weakness. It is grief doing what grief does. You let it move through you, and you do not let it drive. That grief is not a sign you are doing this wrong. It is the sign you are doing it at all. You cannot lose a self you never really inhabited and feel nothing. The ache is the proof that something real is finally moving. If you have spent your life as the calm in every room and a stranger in your own, leave one line in the comments. Write this: I kept everyone steady and went missing inside it. Say it where the next person who has gone quiet in this exact way will find it and understand they are not the only ones standing in the gap. Now to the part that catches everyone off guard. When you begin to change, the people closest to you will not celebrate. Many of them will resist, and some will fight you. You will expect the strangers to be the problem and discover that the resistance comes from the people who love you most. It helps to understand why, because the why is not what it looks like. It is tempting to read their reaction as simple selfishness, as if they only want the version of you that was useful to them. There is some of that, but Jung saw something deeper underneath it. For years you were a still surface, and a still surface does one thing better than anything else. It reflects. Every person who came to you saw a flattering version of their own face in your steadiness. Their difficulty softened, their behavior absorbed and never named. You were the mirror that showed each of them the most forgivable version of themselves. When the surface starts to move, the reflection moves with it. Suddenly they do not see the comfortable version of themselves in you anymore. They see something truer, and truer is not what they came for. Jung put it plainly. People will go to remarkable lengths to avoid facing their own souls. An awakening empath becomes a mirror they can no longer control and your growth quietly exposes their stagnation without your saying a word. That exposure is intolerable to anyone committed to staying asleep. So they push. They call you cold, they call you changed, they tell you that you are not yourself. And in a sense, they are right. You are not the self they built their comfort on. That self is dying, exactly as it should. The man drying glasses learns this the slow way. He starts gently to ask for things, small things. He says he is tired once, instead of asking how everyone else is. The reaction stuns him. The people who called him dependable for 30 years grow cool, or wounded, or annoyed, as though he has broken a contract no one ever wrote down out loud. He had always believed they loved him. What he discovers is that many of them loved what he did for them. And the difference between those two things is the loneliest thing he has ever had to learn. But the loneliness is not the whole story, and it is not permanent. Something else happens in the same stretch, quieter and slower, and easy to miss while you are grieving the ones who fall away. A few people do not recoil. A few meet the moving surface and lean closer, because what they wanted from you was never the reflection. They wanted you. They may have been there all along, half seen behind the crowd of people who only came for the mask, and now that the mask is going, they finally come into focus. This is the hidden mercy of the whole passage. It does not only show you who loved the performance, it shows you who was waiting for the person underneath it to come out. You lose the relationships that were built on your absence, and you keep or find the ones that can hold your presence. That trade feels like pure loss while it is happening. On the far side of it, it is the first honest set of relationships you have ever had. To go further, you have to meet the part of yourself you exiled in order to become the agreeable one. Jung called it the shadow, and almost everything you have heard about it is wrong. The shadow is not your evil. It is not some darkness you are meant to defeat. The shadow is simply everything about you that was unacceptable to the people you needed, pushed down into the dark so you could stay safe and stay loved. For an empath, the contents of that locked cabinet are very specific. To stay agreeable, you buried your anger. To stay easy, you buried your wanting, the ambition and the hunger and the plain desire to take up space. And to stay safe, you buried the single most dangerous word a sensitive child can own. No, all of it went into the dark, not because any of it was bad, but because it threatened the mask that was keeping you alive. Here is the turn the surface accounts never make. The shadow did not only hold what was ugly in you, it held what was strong. Your shadow has been keeping your spine for you, down there in the dark, all these years, until you were finally able to carry it. The anger you buried to stay lovable is the same force that will finally let you protect yourself. The no you swallowed is the exact instrument a boundary is made of. The wanting you called selfish is the engine of a life that is actually yours. You did not lose those parts, you stored them. And what you stored is now knocking on the cabinet doors. Watch the wanting especially, because for the empath, it is often the most deeply buried of all. Somewhere early you learned that to want things openly was dangerous, that hunger made you a burden, that desire took up room someone else needed more. So you became the person with no preferences. You let others choose the restaurant, the plan, the direction of your own life, and you called it being easygoing. It was not easygoing. It was a wanting so thoroughly exiled that you lost the ability to feel it at all. When it begins to come back, it will not arrive politely. It will feel like greed, like too much, like a self-centeredness you were taught to be ashamed of. It is none of those things. It is only an appetite for your own life, returning at the volume it was suppressed at. The size of it is not a warning. It is the measure of how long it went unfed. Understand what that buried anger has been doing all this time, because it never simply vanished. What you push into the shadow does not die. It goes underground and runs you from below. The anger you would not feel leaked out sideways for years. It became the exhaustion that had no medical cause. It became the resentment that ambushed you in the middle of doing someone a kindness. It became the cold withdrawal that arrived after months of saying yes to everything. You read all of it as your own failures of character. They were never failures. They were the pressure of a self that had been refused a voice, finding the only exits left to it. A feeling denied at the front door does not leave the house. It finds another way in. Jung was unsparing about this. What you refuse to face in yourself does not disappear. It governs you from the dark, and it quietly arranges your outer life to match what you will not look at within, until the day you finally turn and meet it directly. He said that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears in the world outside you as fate. The disorientation you feel as the shadow returns is not the problem. It is the work itself. It is the confrontation you spent your whole life avoiding, finally underway. And now the peace almost no one names, the peace that makes people abandon this exact stage. When the buried no finally comes back, your first attempt to use it will not feel like strength. It will feel like cruelty. You will set the smallest boundary, something another person would consider unremarkable, and your whole body will flood with the conviction that you have done something violent. You will feel like a monster for saying a thing that was only true. You will lie awake replaying it, certain you have hurt someone, ready to apologize and take it all back. This is the moment so many people slam the cabinet shut again and reseal the mask. Because the feeling is so unbearable, they assume it must mean they are doing harm. It does not mean that. Jung would tell you to look closely at where that feeling comes from, because it is not coming from the present. It is coming from the floor of the house your conscious mind rarely visits. Your nervous system learned what a boundary was by being on the receiving end of the wrong ones. The only models you ever had for someone saying no were the people who used no to wound you, to withdraw love, to punish, to control. So the nervous system filed a single equation very early, before you had language to question it. A boundary is an act of harm. Someone draws a line, and someone gets hurt. That equation does not care that you have grown up. When you finally draw a line of your own, your body runs the only program it has, and the program says you have just become one of them. The guilt that floods you is not evidence that you were cruel. It is evidence that you were trained a long time ago to read your own spine as a weapon. The violence you feel is not in the boundary. It is in the memory the boundary woke up. Notice how physical it is, because that tells you where it comes from. A thought does not make your hands shake. A thought does not put a stone in your stomach and a flush in your face and the urge to undo the thing before the other person has even finished reacting. That is the body, not the mind. And the body keeps a far older record than the mind does. It learned, in rooms you may not even remember, that drawing a line was the precise moment love got withdrawn, or the moment the punishment started, or the moment you were made to understand you had cost someone something they would not forgive. So when you draw your own line now, the body does not run a calm assessment of the present. It pulls the old file and floods you with the feeling that matched it. And the feeling says the same thing it always said. You are about to lose them, and it is your fault. Knowing this does not make the wave smaller the first few times. It makes it survivable, because now you know whose voice it actually is, and it is not yours, and it is not now. The man we have been following meets this on an ordinary afternoon. He tells his brother, without heat, that he will not be handling the thing this time. One sentence. He waits for the sky to fall. The guilt arrives exactly on schedule, enormous, certain, insisting he call back and undo it. He sits with it instead. He does not act on it. And in the quiet after the wave passes, he notices something he has never felt in his life. The line held, and no one was actually destroyed. His brother was disappointed, and disappointment turned out to be survivable for both of them. The cruelty he was so sure he had committed never happened. It only felt certain because it was old. This is the threshold, not the absence of the guilt, but the willingness to feel the full size of it and decline to obey it. Every time you let the guilt arrive, without letting it rule you, you teach the oldest part of yourself a new sentence. A boundary is not an act of harm. A boundary is the edge that makes a self possible. Do not mistake the unfamiliar weight of your own spine for cruelty. You are not becoming one of the people who hurt you. You are becoming someone they could not have stopped. So what is actually waking up? Not a new person. That is the revelation the whole descent has been circling. The thing rising through the cracked surface is someone you have met before. It is the original. The child who felt everything before the mask was ever built. The one who got pushed to the bottom of the well so the agreeable self could keep the surface calm. That child never drowned. They held their breath for decades, and they are surfacing now, and they are surfacing holding the one thing they never had the first time. A way to keep the feeling without being destroyed by it. The first time around, you had the depth and none of the protection. You felt everything at full volume with no banks to hold the water, so it flooded you, and the only solution available to a child was to put a lid on the whole well. Now the self comes back with what it lacked, the anger that became a boundary, the no that became an edge, the shadow that turned out to be carrying your spine. These are the banks. They do not lower the water, they give it a shape. And something quiet returns with the surfacing self that you may not have felt since you were very young. The depth that drowned you was never only pain. It was also the way you could walk into a house and know its whole weather in a breath, the way a piece of music could open you to the floor, the way you loved people so completely that it frightened them. You buried that capacity along with everything else, because feeling that much with no banks was unsurvivable. It comes back now too. The same sensitivity that was your wound becomes, with banks around it, the truest instrument you own. You will read a room as fast as you ever did, but the reading will inform you instead of flooding you. You will feel another person's pain as sharply as before, and you will no longer confuse feeling it with being responsible for fixing it. The gift was never the problem. You only ever lacked a shape strong enough to hold it. This is the integration Jung called individuation, the buried self and the conscious self finally meeting and becoming one person, instead of a mask with someone trapped behind it. And it answers the fear that has haunted this entire passage, the fear that waking up means becoming cold or cruel or one of the people who hurt you. It does not. The awakened empath does not feel less. Numbness was never the goal, and anyone who sold you numbness as healing was selling you a smaller cage. You feel everything you always felt, the full depth of the well. You are simply no longer drowning in it, because now the water has banks. The man at the kitchen window feels this arrive on no particular day. Nothing in his circumstances has changed. He is still the one people call. But the frantic checking against everyone else's needs has gone quiet, and in its place is a level, unhurried steadiness. He can feel the whole room exactly as he always could, every current under every word. He simply is no longer available to be fed on for it. He is still the one who feels everything. He is finally also the one who gets to keep himself while he does it. One warning before you go, because there is a trap waiting on this exact road, and Jung named it. When a person who lived their whole life bent toward everyone else first discovers their own edge, the temptation is to swing all the way to the other extreme, to decide that since openness nearly drowned you, you will now feel nothing for anyone, to wear the new coldness like armor and call it healing. Jung called this swing enantiodromia, the way any extreme, held long enough, flips into its opposite. The endless giver becomes the person who gives nothing and mistakes the wall for freedom. But look closely at what has changed in that case, which is nothing. The martyr was shaped entirely by other people. The fortress is shaped entirely by other people too, just bent the other way. Both are still letting the wound hold the pen. Waking up is not swinging from everyone to no one. It is the harder, stranger thing in the middle. You keep the depth and you add the banks. You feel everything and you hold a line. You stay open and you stop being available to be drained. That is not a contradiction. That is the whole of it. So if you have felt yourself going quiet lately, going under in rooms you used to move through easily, hold this as you go. You are not breaking. An old self is dying, the one that was only ever a lid, and the self it kept down is coming up for air. The grief is real. The resistance from others is real. The guilt when you finally say no will feel, for a while, exactly like cruelty. None of that means turn back. It means it is working. The water was never the problem. You only needed banks, and you have been growing them in the dark this whole time. If even part of this names something you have carried alone, leave one line below, different from the first. Write the words, "The no that felt like cruelty was only my own spine coming home." Leave it where the next person standing frozen with their hand an inch from the handle will read it and understand that the violence they feel is old, and the boundary is theirs, and they were never the cruel one. The empath you buried is not coming back the way they left. They are coming back with banks. Stay with the water and let it hold its shape.
Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.